Hey there everyone, this is Verns back again with another Supercoach video. This time it is NBL Supercoach and we're just going to go through some preseason information, I guess our structure and our plans going through the season and I guess our initial team. Now I know it might seem a bit preemptive because we do have a few practice games coming up starting tomorrow. There's actually going to be quite a lot over the next week or so before the season, so a lot of information that we'll be able to take in which will be really good. So it might be a bit preemptive of me to look at a team right now, but they have already had a few preseason games a few weeks ago and sort of through the month of August. So I've taken a bit of a look at that as well. But I did just want to go through, I guess, my plans for this. Now, if you are new to the channel, I have been doing AFL Supercoach YouTube videos for the last 2 seasons, and we'll be doing the NBL this season. I did do BBL Supercoach. Didn't do YouTube videos on it, but I did that probably 2 seasons ago. I think the NBL will actually be a bit similar to that in the structure because there will be double up on games, but the scoring and premiums I think will be very different. For those who don't know what I mean by that, just if you have played BBL, premiums sometimes would just straight up drop a 0 because they're a batter that just went for a duck. And you just can't do anything about it, where I think obviously you'll have more consistent premiums in NBL. So I guess similar to your Supercoach premiums, that when you're paying up for them, they're most likely going to be performing, and it's unlikely you're going to get something like a 0 out of them. But yeah, we're just going to go through that. Once again, if you are new as well, I do appreciate the views, and if you do like, subscribe, follow the journey, see how we go, I will appreciate that. Now I will also put out a league code towards the end of the video. I'll make one and just put it out, so if you are interested in that and joining and just playing for some fun, feel free to go ahead and join that at the end of the day. Obviously, if you just want to jump to the end of that and do that, then cool, you know what, I appreciate you being here nevertheless, but if you do stick through the video, then that's really awesome. So we'll be just jumping into the team. I'm not going to go through picking player to player just because at the end of the day I don't really have a huge breakdown on each of them. I guess I will go through my thoughts on them to a degree. But I guess before we even really go through the players here, as we can see, we've got Chris Smith, Luke Traveller for my forwards. Before we really go through this, as you'll notice, there's a bit of a theme here. The players I've picked are all from very similar teams. Now, the reason for that is just because of the way the schedule works. As we take a look over here, we have double up games. So you have games where Melbourne's going to be playing twice in week 1, Southeast Melbourne also, Perth, and then I think Adelaide. There we go. They'll all play 2 games in week 1. So naturally, having 2 games, you have a chance to score double the points because there's just, you're playing 2 games in 1 week. So just as similar to BBL in that sense, you will try and obviously load towards these weeks where you have double up weeks. But because of that, I did a little bit of a look into it. Now, look, this isn't going to look very good. It's just something I put on a notepad because I just wanted something to help me work out what I wanted to be doing. If you follow along, cool. If you just neglect it and want to work it out yourself, feel free to. But as you can see here, I've brought on just, I guess, the first 6 rounds. So what this is showing is that Melbourne have 2 games, then they have 1 game, putting them to a total of 3 games, then they'll have a total of 5 games, total of 7, 9, and 10. So in the first 6 rounds, Melbourne will have a total of 10 games, same with Brisbane, South East Melbourne, and we will have teams like New Zealand and Cairns down on 7 games. So more or less, I've done this over 5 round periods to help me sort of figure out when I should be moving players in and out. Now, just looking at the season early on, I think obviously you can just work it out just by looking at it, but we want to be avoiding New Zealand and Cairns players to start off, just because they only have 7 games in the first 6, or even 5 in the first 5 rounds. So they do get a double up game in round 6 at least. So specifically for Cairns, you actually look at getting players around then, but sorry, I'll get to that in a bit. So as you can see, that's why my team is tilted towards me picking Melbourne players, Southeast Melbourne players, and Brisbane players. I'm more or less looking at the 5 rounds here. As we can see, Melbourne is the only team with 9 games in the first 5 rounds, so they have a double up in every round but 1. So getting Melbourne players is just going to be really nice. Then actually moving Melbourne players on from there is much better, because what they'll have after that is 1 game, 1 game, 1 game, 1 game, 1 game for the next 5 weeks straight. So we want to be getting them in and then getting them out by round 5. So start off and then rotate them out. And I think that's how it's going to be with this. It is, to a degree, unlimited trade format because there will be 20 rounds, but you have 42 trades. Sorry, maybe 21 rounds, but either way, I think that would be unlimited trades unless you've got 3 trades. I haven't really taken a look at how many trades you can do each week. If you can do 3 trades a week, then obviously that does change it. Now, I might be looking at this as too much of an AFL Supercoach where I'm not looking to be aggressive enough because I'm looking over a 5-week period, and maybe I should be looking closer to a 3-week period and try and move more proactively to get a leg up. If you did want to do that, I mean, something you can definitely do is South Melbourne do have 2 double ups in a row. One of the most expensive players in the game is Mitch Creek, and watching him, there's a reason he's the most expensive player. He's very good, and he scores a lot of points, as well as doing a lot around the ground. So, he's going to play 4 games in the first 2 weeks. So, very good player to get on. Probably very good player to be captaining. Then after that, you'll have, I think it's Byron Cotton from Perth, who also is a very expensive player who looks very good as well. And you could always look at bringing in Mitch Creek for the first 2 weeks, captaining him for both of those, and then transitioning into Byron for his double up, and then you could go back to Mitch again and just sort of yo-yo the captain between them, because you're going to get 2 games out of, well, what has shown as the 2 best players previously scoring for you. So you could yo-yo them back and forth. The only thing there is obviously that would be using a trade pretty proactively, as I mentioned, pretty aggressively, and if other things do happen in that week where you have to be moving players on, it's going to leave you a bit stuck. But if, obviously you're not really doing anything else in those weeks, and this could be a very proactive play to get a heads up, and I think that could definitely be a strategy for some people, and something that I, to a degree, am considering. Do you just start Mitch Creek, get the double up, go down to Byron Cotton, it might be Bryce Cotton, whatever, go down to Cotton, get the double up, back up to Mitch Creek, get the double up, and then you can use the money from there, or even hold Mitch for another week because he'll get a single game, but then another double up before then a single. So by the time we're hitting round 6, he's got the 10 games in round 6 total, and then we want to just, I guess, be getting him onto someone else. After that, Cotton does hit a double not long after, but yeah, just a definite strategy you could be looking at. I don't know if that's correct. At the end of the day, guys, this is brand new to me, the NFL Supercoach. It's not something I've done before. Sorry, NBL Supercoach. Is it NFL? Whoops. NBL Supercoach. Not something I've done before. I think it's going to be new to all of us. Even for those that have maybe played on different platforms for the fantasy sort of format. It's not something I've done, so just trying to work it out as I go. So work with me here, guys. These are the ideas that have come to my head as I've sort of looked through it and looked through the information. So something else that's extremely noticeable in this list, and you may notice this, but technically on the next 5 rounds, so we obviously have Melbourne having 9 games in the first, and then in the next 5 rounds we have Cairns having 9 games. And what actually happens here is Cairns will play a double up, and then they don't play for 2 weeks in a row. So Cairns players, that's why they're a hard avoid. But then when it comes to round 5, from round 5 onwards, they're going to be double, single, double. So they're going to have doubles for 7 weeks in a row there to make up for them basically not playing for 2 weeks. So Cairns players are going to be basically a must-get from at least round 7 onwards, because they're round 7 to, I think, 13 is just insane. If obviously you can get them around 5 as well, there's no problem there. The thing is, obviously, Melbourne only play 1 game from then onwards, so I'm thinking that might be a time that I actually transition my Melbourne players. I get the double-up game out of them into week 5, then we transition Melbourne players to Cairns players, and then we can hold them through a lot of really good stretch. Saying that historically the Cairns players don't look like they're great Supercoach performers, but we'll see how it goes throughout the year, and we'll just we'll pick up who's performing when they're performing. But definitely a period of time I want to be getting on Cairns players. So yeah, if you feel free to, just print screen this and have a bit of a look at it, and if you want, but that's sort of what I've worked out as to when the runs are hot and when they're sort of cold, and coming towards the end of the year, something like Illawarra Hawks, they have a nuts run at the end of the year. So early on in the year, they play not many games. It's pretty low at 7, then 5. They've only played 12 and they need 28. So they've got to make up 16 games in the back 10. So they end up playing 16 games in the back 10, where a lot of other teams are only playing 14, 14, 13, 14, 14, 14, 15, 14, 14. So they end up just naturally more games towards the end. Specifically, I think from round 13 here it is, if they hit a double, then they hit a double, then they hit a double, then they have a single, then they have a double. So it's just the last like 7 games or so, they have like 6 doubles, or maybe 5 games. No, did I do that? Yeah, 7 games, they have 6 doubles. So it's going to be a pretty nuts run for them at the end. So it might be one of those things where, as I said, we transition Melbourne players down to Cairns players. We run them hot until they start hitting their singles. And this is the perfect time to then move them down to the Illawarra players and then run the Illawarra players until the end of the year. As I sort of mentioned, maybe that's not proactive enough, that thinking. Maybe that's too AFL Supercoach, because that's going to be a slow play where I'm holding players for long times and I could just be aggressively trading. So definitely something to consider. Obviously, moving players, it's not something that I'm going to be able to move like 5 players on those rounds either, so I might have to move them preemptively 1 week earlier, or even just holding them an extra week. And it could be one of those things too that, I've got a bunch of Illawarra players at the end of the season. Let's just say I've somehow managed to put 4 of them in my team, but then I see that Mitch Creek is going to have a double up here in round 16 and 15, so I decide to flick one of them to Mitch Creek if I possibly can, take his double up, and then aggressively flip back. And maybe that's going to be the strategy, trying to overload where we can when they have good runs, but then when teams, when Cairns has his 7 games in a row where they're just going nuts, when we see another team also have 2 double ups in a row, like Tasmania here or something like that, you quickly jump to the Tasmanian player that's hot and you just sort of run them for their 2 weeks and then come back to the Cairns player and move on to the Illawarra player, whoever has the run going on. But look, that may not help you guys because it's not very visually pleasing, and I understand that. It's just something that I made up when I was sort of looking through it all, just to help me really figure out what was happening in these early games. And as I said, maybe this is me looking at it not proactively enough. Maybe I should be looking at it 3-week stints instead of 5-week stints. But look, I'm sort of happy with how that's looking. I think that's going to help me. If you guys want to use it, cool. If you guys don't, then definitely feel free to just follow the videos and listen to what I'm saying rather than working it out. Now, I made these notes down here. So basically, round 5 onwards, we're jumping up to Cairns players, Illawarra players, and Breakers also have a lot of games at the end. So as you can see, they have 9 Illawarra, so way more than everyone else. But then Breakers also have 8, and I think, Perth also have 8 at the end there too. So, and then Melbourne players out by round 5 just because they have 5 weeks in a row of just 1 game, which obviously isn't ideal. So, just little notes I added there. Now, in regards to the players I have picked so far, as I mentioned, we are targeting Brisbane, Melbourne, South Melbourne players. The Adelaide players weren't the worst case scenario. They also had 8 games in the first 5 rounds, and then they have a single game in round 6. So, a total of 9 games in the first 6 rounds. So, just below them. I guess coming back to the table here, Perth and Adelaide only 1 game less. It's not a huge difference, and considering Perth get a double up in round 6 where Adelaide don't. They're already at round 8 and they're matching Brisbane and South Melbourne by this point, so it's not really a deficit, saying that Tasmania is also meeting them. But I just liked, the difference was that Adelaide and Tasmania then have a 1 week where South Melbourne and Brisbane have a double up coming into round 6, so that's the difference there. As to why I was focusing those players over the Adelaide or Tasmanian players. Now, with this, as we can see, I do have an Adelaide player in the team, and that's purely just because I didn't see a centre I liked. And this was honestly the best I saw from Wiley. He played 1 game in the preseason. He looked really good. He didn't play many minutes, but in the minutes he did play, he was very efficient on the stat sheet, more or less. That's what it is at the end of the day. We're looking at the stat sheet. Players might play well on the ground or do all those 1%ers, but we know from AFL and the other sports that it's like just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're a good super coach player. But Wiley came in and just I feel like only had like 11 minutes of game time and just put down like 14 points and just had like a nutty stat sheet for like 11 minutes of game time. So he looked really crazy in the time that he played, as to why I've sort of put him in as the center. And then we actually have the Melbourne center here as well. I don't even know how to say the name. I'm just going to call him Porty. Huck Porty is probably roughly it. Now, the reason I'm just going to hit trade here is just to show you a lot of players at the start of the season I can see have started with, where is he? They've started with Joe Jr. I'm just going to call him because that makes life easy. Lual was probably the first part of that. But I mean, it's only 5%, and that should be 0%. He's actually done his wrist. He hurt it back in, I believe it was July, had to do surgery, might have even been June, and it's 6 months roughly off. He's not going to be back till November, so he's going to miss the first month and a half of the season. Now, two things this means. Obviously, you're not starting him because he's not playing early, so it doesn't even matter that Melbourne have a good run early. Don't start him. He's not playing. But what that does mean is that the backup center from Melbourne instantly starts getting more court time. In these games, he performed decent enough, in my opinion, for what I saw. If anything, I think they were running a bit of a smaller team with Traveller doing a lot of the work. And that might be another thing that's misleading to Traveller, is that he had like 10 boards. He only put up like 14 points himself, but he was getting a lot of rebounds and he had a lot of energy, and I just really loved the game he was playing. But Melbourne are naturally just smaller because they're missing their import center. So because of this, it means that the backup center is obviously going to get more court time naturally. Because of him being out, and then that just means that obviously his value goes up. He's probably going to have higher output because he's going to be on the court for longer, which just means he's just naturally more valuable at his price, as to why we've grabbed him. Traveller, same thing at the end of the day. With him missing the center, he's a guard forward, but he's been playing, I don't know, he just was definitely doing a lot under the boards. He just had the energy to want every board. He was just grabbing all the boards. He just looked really good in the game. And as I said, I just really like the energy he brought. And I didn't even looked at the stat sheets after I watched these games, and he was someone that, like, before this game's even finishing, like, I've got his name down. Like, I want to look at this guy. What is he doing? And obviously he's very expensive, and that's why. But if the players are obviously scoring points, getting boards, he's finding more ways to get Supercoach points, that's what we want. So you'd assume with a naturally smaller side, that means that the rest of the team has to be on the onus of getting rebounds, which naturally means maybe his rebounds go up a bit, which just means that once again his output has been increased. So two players that I think will be positively affected by him missing the first month, Lual Jr. So that's the reason they're in my team. I guess something else I needed to talk about as well is just also the bench scoring. Bench scoring is actually 50%. This, once again, isn't like AFL, and it's not like BBL either in that sense. But previously, you've been able to put players on the bench, and it's like, hey, look, as long as they play, it doesn't really matter. It's not like their score counts towards my score. So if they can accrue value, then cool. Not the case here. 50% of their score counts. So you need players that are playing, and they are, you know, I guess at the end of the day, we're always looking for value with our rookies. You know, you'd pick up a rookie, you look for value, you want somebody, I mean, technically with any player, not even the rookies, premiums, whatever you want to say, you want a player that's going to be performing above their price range. I think that's even more important because of the bench having a 50% scoring here, and it means that you can't just pick a half-baked rookie or a cheap player because they're cheap so you can field a more expensive team. You have to take into account that your bench score matters, so you need players that can hopefully put out at least what they're valued at, and preferably more. So just something to definitely be keeping in mind here. You can't just dump a bunch of 58k players on the bench and then just load your actual team. It's probably not going to work. Maybe it works. I don't know. It's our first year of doing this. But that's two reasons why I've grabbed those two players, and as I said, just very happy with the performances they put out. Same with Wiley, just happy with what he did too. Now, as you're going to see, I do have a lot of inputs here. We have Chris Smith, Wiley, Cummings, and Clark, who are all imports, and that's not me literally just going out and grabbing all the imports. I generally watching these games, the imports just looked really good. Like, they just were doing great. Chris Smith came in to one of his games, and to be fair, I was pretty focused on Ian White in this game. He was doing really well too, but Smith came in, put out like 26 points and looked amazing, and I was like, okay, this guy's really good. He looks really good. Obviously, it's a preseason game, so once again, it's always really hard to tell sometimes because players may not be playing in the exact role they're going to play in the regular season, nor may they have the minutes that they're going to have in the regular season. But there's a reason you bring imports in, because you want immediate impact. They aren't like these rookies or the young bloods that you're trying, or the young youths that you're trying to blood into the system and get games into and get experience into. No, you're bringing these imports in because you want immediate impact. You want them to be good right now. You want them to improve the team this season. And Chris Smith just looked really good in his game. Came out as it, dropped 26 points, looked great. In that game, Ian White also played like a good 26 minutes and looked really good himself. I think dropped like 18 points and definitely got my notice. I then watched him in his next game. Chris Smith didn't play the second game that they put out. Now, Ian White was a starter in the first game. He wasn't a starter in the next game, but he still put out 24 minutes. So they're definitely putting time into him, and it's definitely one of those things where it's opportunity. Like, for what everyone's been saying, this kid's good. He just hasn't really had the opportunity. Preseason games, obviously, you're going to give opportunity to those younger players, but he was really good in both those games, where I wouldn't be surprised to see him get that opportunity in the regular season, even if you're toning back his minutes from 24, 26, whatever it is, tone him back to 15. He's still going to play enough of the game, and he looked good enough to have enough of an impact that for an 88K, he is, in my opinion, the biggest must-have coming into this season so far. He has looked incredible in the games I've seen, and when I thought I was grabbing him, I didn't expect an 88K player. I was like, that is a steal. I need this guy. Like, not having him just feels almost silly, at least in my personal opinion. So he's my biggest must-have if you are wondering for a cheap bench player that's looking good. Ian White. As I said, this may all change once we come into these next few preseason games, because maybe he just doesn't get the court time he's had in the first two. But as I said, he looked really good for what I did see. And then coming down to Cummings and Ian Clark. Ian Clark, once again, he also had a really good game, just with Traveler as well. Traveler and Ian Clark were the two big standouts that I sort of noticed in that game, that I was like, man, these guys are good. They had the game against South Melbourne where Creek dropped like 32 on them, but Traveler just looked really good. The ball looks like it's going through Ian Clark a lot. He's a bit older. I think he's like 32, but he's definitely good. He's definitely got the experience factor. And once again, he's an import that's here for immediate impact. It's not someone that they're bringing in to get games into. So I was just really happy with his performance, and Will Cummings was just also really good. He was obviously with Mitch Creek on that team, but he was just sort of the, I don't know what the terminology would be here, but it's like Mitch Creek he's I guess the main show, and then you're not expecting to have a good side gig or anything like that, and then all of a sudden Will Cummings just comes out and he's doing really well. I think they said he was a previous Paris League MVP or France League MVP, but he was good in the game as well. I liked what he was doing. It wasn't huge scoring numbers like I forgot his name, Creek, but he was doing what he needed to do. He was getting other stats other ways, and he just looked really good. I was just very happy with his game. So yeah, the imports I thought looked all really good in their games, so it's hard to not pick them right now, but obviously got a lot of games to go from there. Then naturally, as I said, I'm picking more players towards that Brisbane, Melbourne, and South Melbourne. Foxwell, he looked okay. I think DJ Mitchell's also looked okay. I mean, these players honestly looked okay. They didn't really jump out of their skin at me, but it was one of those things that I'm looking for players from this team that are hopefully cheaper, that are going to be getting more opportunity or have a reason to maybe put out a better output than what they're valued at, and especially since they have all these double up games, they're just naturally going to be higher value than any other rookies or any other cheaper players from other teams that maybe get the same opportunity but half the amount of games because of how the way the season's structured. And then Johns I was actually really happy with his game as well, as why I've picked him up. He wasn't outstanding, but he was relevant enough, in my opinion. And then like when I saw his price tag at 58K, I was sort of like, look, you weren't outstanding, but you're extremely cheap, and even if you're going to get 10 minutes on the field, hopefully you can get some sort of output in those 10 minutes, and at your price tag, hopefully you can just increase a bit in value and maybe be a bit more value down the line. But yeah, that's the opening team. That's my plans going forward. That's my structure. yeah, it's going to be an interesting year because I've never done this before. I'll try and do the weekly uploads for these. It's obviously going to be a bit harder because they sort of just, I mean, this one ends on Sunday, but it's kind of like BBL where it's a bit more sporadic, is it? No, they end on the Sundays. Okay. Yeah, that should be pretty easy then to do the weekly uploads for those. I shouldn't have a problem with that. But yeah, we'll see how we're going. Feel free to give me feedback if you guys think I'm completely wrong with some of these players that I've looked at. If you think the structure I'm doing is incorrect, if you just, just feel free to tell me what you're thinking. Or like, your opinion, how you feel about this. But as I said, I'm going to be doing a league code in just a minute. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm just going to simply create it right here in front of everyone because why not? Doesn't really matter. Create league. We're just going to call it Vern's YouTube. And we're just going to do that percentage. I like total points more, so we're just going to do template. I didn't even think of that. 16 teams, it's going to be probably much easier. I probably could have done a create your own, actually. Oh, well, it's already done. Anyway, that's the league code right there, 5225558. So feel free to jump in and join the 16 league one. Maybe I'll end up making a second one if we get enough people in, and I might be able to customize it and make a few more people able to join. So yeah, once again, everyone, thanks for tuning in. I really do appreciate that. And I'll probably speak to you before the start of the season once we've had a few more of these practice games and we've seen a bit more. But till then, peace, later.